Now, with countries witnessing a sharp surge in the number of COVID-19 infections across the world, mainly fueled by the fast-spreading Omicron variant, the WHO has now warned that dismissing the Omicron variant as a mild infection will be a monumental mistake. Now, during a media briefing on Thursday, WHO's Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom said that while Omicron does appear to be less severe in comparison with the Delta variant, it does not mean it should be categorized as a mild infection.
While Omicron does appear to be less severe compared to Delta, especially in those vaccinated, it does not mean it should be categorized as mild. Just like previous variants, Omicron is hospitalizing people and it's killing people.
I think an epidemic, either naturally caused or intentionally caused, is the most likely thing to cause, say, 10 million excess deaths. As we've seen various flu scares come along, we haven't had a super good response. So the paradigmatic examples are smallpox for an intentionally caused thing, that there was a simulation called Dark Winter that didn't come out very well, i.e. smallpox scored 1 and humanity scored 0.
On June 22, 2001, the United States government began Operation Dark Winter. Operation Dark Winter was not a war game. Instead, something more unusual. Dark Winter was a germ game. In 2001, the US military, government, and media launched a mock battle against pathology. The premise was simple. The bioterror organization released a deadly virus into the country, and smallpox is spreading quickly. The US government must now react to contain the outbreak and stop further harm. How did we do? The results were disastrous. Within 48 hours, the government failed its objectives. The loss of human life was high, and when Operation Dark Winter ended 3 days later, a summary of recommendations were given to implement across different levels of government to better prepare in case of a future dark winter.
Of all the things that are out there, what could cause an excess in a single year of 10 million deaths? Now, clearly a big war could, and a pandemic, natural or created by bioterror. The natural pandemic, the last gigantic one, was 100 years ago. We are healthier today, but the speed of travel, and therefore the speed of global spread, that works against us. But in some ways, the bioterror thing scares me the most. Governments having been prepared in advance and going through simulations, that will help them make the decisions that are only in their hands.
In Baltimore, Maryland, in a house 5 blocks south of the Capitol, in 2018, Operation Clad X began. The scenario was similar to Dark Winter. This time, an influenza outbreak has occurred in Venezuela. It is likely to reach the US in a few days. The government must react. The simulation ran for 5 days. Day 1 began with preliminary reports and the government grappling to respond to uncertain information. Day 3, the sickness was confirmed in the United States. Day 5, the simulation ended. The process is fascinating, and there's a lot to dig into, but one interesting note is that Clad X was documented. There are recordings throughout the entire germ game, and I recommend you all dig through their archives to learn more. But now I want to play you a portion from that last day of the Clad X simulation. It's slow, but I ask you to pay close attention to what they're saying. It's important.
We are now 3 months since the last meeting, and the pandemic has rapidly worsened globally and in the United States. The number of cases and deaths are increasing exponentially.
Remember, this is a simulation.
Here is the current U.S. situation. Approximately 60 cases 3 months ago at the last meeting to nearly 60,000 cases now. Global markets have plummeted from its high 5 months ago, and the Fed is now projecting a deep economic recession. Many domestic hospitals are failing due to lack of staff and supplies. Telework and social distancing measures are being encouraged by the CDC. Schools across the country are closed, and many public gatherings have been canceled. Public demand for surgical masks and respirators far exceed the available supply. National Guard units in multiple states have been deployed to provide security for pharmacies and hospitals.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and today I will be your Master of Ceremonies for Event 201. On behalf of our center and our partners, the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our audience here in New York, as well as our larger virtual audience participating online today. The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of societal and economic challenges it would pose. The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics. Today's scenario is going to simulate meetings of a multi-stakeholder group called the Pandemic Emergency Board. This board has been urgently convened by the World Economic Forum, and Johns Hopkins has been asked to moderate the board meetings and provide expertise during the board's deliberations. The Event 201 scenario is fictional, but it's based on public health principles, epidemiologic modeling, and assessment of past outbreaks. In other words, we've created a pandemic that could realistically occur.
Without a question, epidemic risk has become a global strategic concern. I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we have had to respond to so many health emergencies at once. This is a new normal. I don't expect the frequency of these epidemics to reduce, and in fact, vulnerabilities all over the world, developed and developing countries, have increased, not decreased, driven by many, many factors, mainly through human behaviour, economic development, population density, and many others. The scenario you will be presented with this morning could easily become one shared reality one day. I fully expect that we will be confronted by a fast-moving, highly lethal pandemic of a respiratory pathogen.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. At first, the spread was limited to those with close contacts, healthcare personnel, co-workers, and families. But now it's spreading rapidly throughout local communities. International travel has turned local epidemics into a pandemic spanning the globe. Just 3 months ago, CAPS started in South America, but has now reached several countries with more than 30,000 cases and nearly 2,000 deaths.
Continuing our coverage of the newly discovered CAPS disease and the scope of its deadly outbreaks, there are now more than 30,000 reported cases. Experts warn this may be just the beginning of a global problem. GNN science reporters have produced a video about what we know so far about CAPS, the virus, the outbreak, and the resulting chaos.
CAPS is a novel coronavirus related to those viruses that caused the frightening SARS epidemic in 2003 and the deadly MERS outbreaks in recent years. Scientists think each infected person in turn infects on average 2 more people. This disease is proving more transmissible than SARS or MERS and about as contagious as influenza. Essentially, the cumulative number of cases is doubling every week. At this rate, we can expect to see 16 times as many cases in a month unless we find a way to interrupt transmission. The virus appears to be spreading rapidly in densely populated and impoverished neighborhoods in some megacities in South America. CAPS is a serious respiratory disease. More than half of the recognized cases have required hospital care, creating a huge strain on healthcare systems. The fatality rate is about 10%. For comparison, CAPS is about as lethal as SARS and 2 to 4 times more lethal than the 1918 influenza pandemic, the worst pandemic on record. Even so, some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in a hospital. Alarmingly, those people are able to walk around and spread the virus, not realizing they are doing so. Even worse, international travelers have been arriving at their destinations symptom-free, but within a matter of hours, becoming ill. Travel-related cases have blossomed into outbreaks in a number of locations and have quickly grown faster than health authorities could respond and contain them. Global public health experts are very concerned about this disease because it appears the virus is readily transmitted through the air from person to person. Essentially, all people are susceptible. Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
Our U.S. affiliate has just released polling results on public expectations for a vaccine. A majority of Americans expect a vaccine to be available within 2 months, and 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental. In related news, a significant demand for personal protective equipment like N95 masks and gloves are on the rise due to the pandemic. However, globally, hospitals are running low. Additionally, other critical medical supplies such as saline and antibiotics are dwindling. Countries and companies are reportedly stockpiling supplies, disrupting healthcare supply chains, causing dangerous shortages in many parts of the world.
Stripped supermarket shelves have been a common side effect of the pandemic, but this time anxious shoppers aren't to blame. At Woolworths, some noticeable absentees in the refrigerated section, while at Coles, it's missing meat and a sign of the times. Staff either infected with COVID or deemed close contacts, forced off the job, leaving behind a growing transport backlog and a supply shortage.
Hundreds of thousands of workers that are currently in isolation, that's putting our supply chain under an enormous pressure.
Foodland boss Joseph Romeo estimates a fifth of his company's workforce was absent today.
A lot of staff members are down in the supermarket trade.
Locally owned grocers are in a better position than larger chains, requiring less logistics to transport goods and produce around the state.
We're touching base with all of our growers, processors and manufacturers right now on a daily occurrence.
Heavy hail in Hurghada. The roads of the resort town are covered with snow and hail. The flood hit the foot of Mount Semeru. The incident affected 2 villages. Hail in southern Iran. The Asturias region has suffered from about 50 wildfires, as shown in this video in the direction of Cangas de Onís. Authorities in China's Yunnan province say at least 22 people were affected by the 5.5 magnitude earthquake in Ninlang County. Streets, courtyards and roads are flooded in Kuwait after heavy rain.